Alleluia. Om Mani Padme Om. Allah Satnam.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Monsignor Frank Marriott, retired and from the Bendigo area. We spoke with Monsignor last week. Thanks for coming back.
Delighted to be here.
We were last week talking about spiritual counselling in the context of the Teams movement, which is for married couples.
Yes.
Can we just talk a little bit more about that, because it sort of rolls over into a very important aspect, which is that of listening.
The structure of Teams is basically around a meal, and it's interesting, in some parts of the world they've tried to do it after afternoon tea or supper. It never works.
Right.
There's something about sitting down round a table and then beginning to share your life. So the first, apart from a bit of, they would have a little prayer session before the meal, and then at the meal the first thing they do is to reflect upon their life since the last month. And it's a bit, again, like that see, judge, act experience that I was talking about in YCW.
Yes.
And the idea is that you've built up harmony in your diversity of people at a meeting, so that there's a great trust. I'm there on the sidelines listening to what's going on. If there's something that I feel I should say something about, or there's something that they want clarification, they ask me. And so that sense that we've somewhere, sometime, somehow lost in our world at the moment of deeply listening to one another.
Yes.
We're rediscovering it very much in the teams.
Yes.
And now, not everyone does it, not everyone can do it, I suppose. You can learn it. And I put down to the fact that I was sort of in the YCW, and that again was something similar, although we had a bit more of a leadership role, because you're dealing with sometimes young people between 16 and 25, and you had to do the job of forming them. This is people who are married.
Yeah.
And they're all leaders in their own little family, and we learn to respect one another as that, despite their background.
Yeah.
And I've found it very fulfilling in my own life. I've been to meetings on occasions, I've hardly said anything, had a good meal, shared the gospel perhaps a bit from my perspective, and for the last few years I've been writing little reflections for them as a leading up to my time as spiritual counsellor. I was based in Bendigo. The Oceania team was in Brisbane, Canberra, Melbourne, Sale and Adelaide, and we'd only meet one another physically every now and again, and that was one way of trying to just keep encouraging them to explore what marriage meant, and to try and tell the world that you can have good marriages.
You can make it work.
And make it work.
Yes, well, you mentioned once again with listening, you've been fairly active in the interfaith movement, which is a basic level of people listening to one another. How does that operate in your experience? You've done that in Bendigo, isn't it?
We have. A bit of the background is Bendigo's fairly what the old people would say, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, Celtic.
Yes.
And the big churches were all Catholic, Presbyterian, Uniting, Baptist, Anglican, and a few evangelical churches. In the last 10 years, there's been a subtle but gradual change in the composition of the Bendigo community.
Right.
And we woke up one day to find out that the Muslims in Bendigo wanted to build a mosque.
Yes.
I'd venture to suggest that 90% of the Bendigo community didn't know there were any Muslims in Bendigo when that little bit of news hit the headlines. Historically, I was rung because I was at the cathedral at the time and perceived to be a leader in the Bendigo community. Asked what I was going to do, would I approve of building a mosque and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I couldn't see much reason why the Muslim people shouldn't have a mosque. They want to worship. We've got a cathedral. They want to build a mosque. And besides, I said, we've had a bit of experience of this in Sandhurst, in the diocese, because in Shepparton there were 4 mosques. And I could hear the at the back
Drawing of breath.
because people can get very fixated in their own little area. And so we did call a meeting, and we do have an interfaith council, and currently we have representatives of the Baha'i faith, the Hindu, the Buddhist. We have 2 Buddhist groups in Bendigo. They both belong. They aren't at every meeting, but they get there as well, like us all. The Muslim community, the Sikh community. We've got a Sikh community growing in Bendigo. And then the mainstream Christian communities are there, Catholic, Uniting and Anglican. We also have the Quakers join us. I think I've got them all now.
Yeah.
And that group slowly has learnt to be able to talk to one another.
Yeah.
We've gone out very publicly on many issues, but particularly on that we believe... Oh, the Jewish group are there too, I'm sorry. We've got a very small emerging Goldfield Jewish community who are gathering and coming back, because in the early days, the first religious building in Bendigo was a Jewish synagogue. They lost it all after the First World War, and the community dissipated. They lost huge numbers of their community as soldiers in the First World War. It's a very sad story and needs to be told one day. So our little group meets once a month, and one of the things that's happened, Norman, is this, that the new lass, Joanne Trickey, at the Bendigo Memorial Park, which used to be the old Bendigo Centre, they've rebranded it all, rang me one day and said, and I said, why don't you come to the meeting and talk? She came and said she suddenly discovered that in the whole protocol for the Remembrance Park, they had nothing on their books about how to bury Muslims or Hindus or Sikhs. And she suddenly thought, but they've got a right to be buried. At that stage, the Muslims had to go to Shepparton or Melbourne to be buried.
Oh, right.
Now, it's a little thing, it hasn't made the papers, but it's brought peace to those communities. They've now got a line of action. They can go and see someone. They know they'll be respected. And I believe on one level, that's one of the most marvellous things we've done at the moment. It's one thing to put an ad in the paper saying we believe in a mosque, but to get those nitty-gritty things into place.
Absolutely, and the nitty-gritty thing is we're out of time. And we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Monsignor Frank Marriott, retired. Now, that's very interesting, isn't it? That issue of interfaith activities and community peace, if you like, because everybody dies.
Everybody dies.
So it's an important ceremony for a lot of people.
And Joanne, when she came to see us, I think she startled everyone around the room because we'd never talked about it. I'd never talked about it. None of my other confreres we just presumed there was a cemetery. People
you get buried there.
Felt it a little bit. And that's then sparked a little bit of interest. I know the Jewish community is doing work on the restoration and trying to get the Cemetery Trust, because in of their graves out at the White Hill Cemetery, there's quite a number of people buried there of Jewish, and we believe there are some of the early, because right in the very beginning of Bendigo, Ballarat's had this famous, what do they call it, Eureka?
Yes.
We had a little Red Rebellion in Bendigo, which was settled quietly by a group of miners who took on the authorities about the mining licence. Most of them were under 25, came from all parts of the world. Many of them from the old countries were fleeing conscription, and there was an American Negro as well on that committee. So there's the evidence of that, sadly, in the cemetery, but some of it's been neglected, and now there's a program to try and restore and give proper dignity to those graves, which in a sense got overrun by the Anglo-Celts as they took over the city in the days. And no, I'm not blaming anyone. It's just a fact of life.
Just a fact,
But we woke up to it, and I went home that night thinking, you should have been more awake.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, it's all right to be wise after the fact.
So it's marvellous, marvellous script.
Right.
Marvellous script.
Yeah, but it sort of sets an interesting character to Bendigo, doesn't it? It's got quite a rich unfolding in there. So with your interfaith, you would have other activities. I think you had some lakeside.
We had what we call a spirituality by the lake on Sunday, my memory's bad, 5th, I think, of March this year. And we worked on that occasion with another group in Bendigo called Daybreak, which has been fostering, but it's been on more in a Christian background, and we brought the diversity. And we had 5 speakers and 4 workshops on Sunday, and we got quite a good crowd. We got quite a large crowd. I'm making a decision that they were all good. Probably shouldn't. But they appreciated very much. They heard different faiths speak about how you find peace against the troubles of the moment.
Yes.
And then we sent them off if they wished to go to a labyrinth or to music, where the lass was trying to help them discover peace through music and art, and then the traditional meditation. And at the end of the day, there was a real bubble in the room, and people went off very happy. So whether you did it for 50, 500, it's important to that individual who got... We've got a dinner coming up on Thursday the 23rd of this month, and again we're trying to tackle on an interfaith basis the reality of the need for trained people to help in emergencies. And we've got Jenny McGurk, who works with the Victorian Council of Churches Emergency Ministries, and she was on duty during the Burke Street fiasco recently. And we're hoping that will broaden, if you like, the appeal of the interfaith group to the Bendigo community, to see that we're trying to get all aspects of the Bendigo involved in providing this service, which reminds me of one of the other things we've been doing recently, all the new legislation about safe schools, safe churches, safe homes. Many of our smaller faith groups in Bendigo hadn't heard of that. So we had Nick up from Melbourne to speak to our, again, that's Open Doors. There's going to be a major seminar in Bendigo soon to help the minor, I don't mean minor, but the smaller groups, because it's a real challenge for small groups, and they can't avoid it if they get together for a prayer service and there's kids there. They have to be compliant. And who's told them, apparently. So that's, that's just a few of the little things we've done.
Well, the interfaith movement also, apart from the theological side of it, but there's the cultural and linguistic side. Cultural particularly.
Food.
Yes, that's
Food.
right. Yes.
It's one of the things we're challenging in Bendigo for the Victorian Interfaith Conference in November. We've got the site, we've got the place, we've got all that stuff. We've got to get food that's acceptable to all those delegates. We're expecting 400 from the various interfaith groups all around Victoria. First time it's ever been held outside Melbourne. You better get on your knees and pray for us, because we need a bit of help from the Lord as well. I'd imagine so. My experience of those sort of gatherings is they usually serve the Sikh Indian type food, which is all vegetarian, so they get around it. I think we might be going down that path.
That's right. Now that's fascinating. So but then in Bendigo you've gone on to something else, which is around the cathedral, and that's the Aspire Precinct,
Yes.
which ties into the interfaith as well. So perhaps we could, and it's a very, very impressive brochure we have here. What's the story behind Aspire?
Strangely enough, looking back on the years, when I was sent to the cathedral, I was presented with a marvellous building with lots of treasures that had been left to it, which were all securely behind bars, so that you could never see them, they never came out, which got me thinking in time. There's a story to be told as to why people with faith did all this.
And you just mentioned time.
We're out of time.
We're out of time, but we'll come back. We'll be back in a moment.
Allah. Alleluia. Allah.
Welcome back. You're watching Harmony University, and we're speaking with Monsignor Frank Marriott, whom I interrupted rudely at the end of our break.
That's all right.
And you were talking about the Aspire Precinct,
Yes.
which you seem to be pretty passionate about it. So tell us more about that.
All right. Well, I was reminding you and listeners, watchers, viewers, about the treasures that were locked up in the cathedral. And just it started to form in my mind, why did people do all this against the background, the goldfields, the poverty, blah, blah, blah. And one day the Presbyterian minister rang me up and he's got a piece of glass from one of their churches that they inherited in Heathcote, the Last Supper scene. Okay, not brilliant, but it was made on the goldfields.
Oh, right.
And again the question bubbled up, why did people do that? Because apparently Masons on the goldfields was the oldest stained glass manufacturers in Victoria. They've since been bought out by Ballarat, which is another, but they're restoring it for us. And then the possibility of the Star of David from my previous mentioned Jewish synagogue was alerted. And so little bits and pieces. And slowly the thing grew, what's going on here? Against that, it's, the last 10, 15 years haven't been happy years for churches, for people of faith, and people are questioning all that. And I just got thinking to me, if we could tell the story of people who, against a totally different background, when they probably had nothing, sacrificed lots of their livelihood and supported. And why did they do it? Their faith.
Yeah.
And another little thing cropped in was, when you look at Bendigo, and let alone Ballarat, people who dug holes in those days invested in buildings back in the town. What's going to be in the Pilbara when the bulldozers and the scrapers move out? Just big holes.
That's right. Yeah.
So there was a faith element there in the community that wanted to invest and create a better lifestyle. Now all this sort of bubbled up and I started talking about it. A few people said, oh, never thought about that before. Appreciation of faith. And we've had various workshops, and one day the La Trobe Uni, we've got a project going with the La Trobe Uni to try and develop some stories.
Yep.
And of course, once you open the book, there's stories everywhere of people with faith.
Yeah,
and we had this session one day, 12 different presenters, 12 different stories about faith, and the history man from the La Trobe was just thrilled. So it's developed into, how do you do this?
Yeah.
The Aspire Foundation, I'm guilty of setting that up, and it's a proper company with board of directors and all the things that you have to have. And it's now charged with developing an area around the cathedral that will open its doors and help people explore the whole nation of faith. And we like saying faith on the goldfields to kick it off. But where does faith play a role in your life, in the life of the city, in today's world?
Right.
That it's something that maybe many people would say is intangible, and you're probably right. But on the other hand, it's a reality that changed Bendigo I'm using Bendigo as an example for the city. And if today we could get people, and particularly young people, so engaged, they may start to see the connection between, if you like, belief and we're back to the old C. Judge Act, what the head and the heart and the hands.
Exactly.
And we've had lots of people putting up their hands to help us. We've had lots of people looking much to say, he's off his head, he's done, you know, all that. But at the end of the day, I am firmly convinced that if we can get the different faiths getting together to explore what their people did in the light of their belief for the well-being, otherwise we're going to keep bombing one another until eternity. So I suppose in one sense it's a big ask of a lot of people to see that this project could change the way the Australian community lives at the moment. But I'm firmly convinced it could. And I'm thanking for the opportunity just to put that out into the community at the moment. If people want to get me going on it, I can wind up on it.
Well, you're pretty wound up about it now, so...
Now, I think it's terribly important for the Australian community. The Victorian government has acknowledged its importance and put some money into the project. Commonwealth, we missed out several times, and I just think if all the things going on up there in Canberra at the moment, and they're always going on about we're the best multicultural country in the world, blah, let's build on that and do something practical.
That's right.
Come clean, Commonwealth, come clean.
Well, it's interesting that Bendigo particularly, because Bendigo's got a long history, but one of the things that always strikes you with Bendigo is when you drive in, what's the first thing you see? The cathedral. It really does set the scene for Bendigo. It's quite amazing. So there's a whole architectural thing going on here too, isn't it? In the grounds of
they're going to beautify. And one of the things that's cropped up, I wanted this finished 6 years ago. I'm impatient. But what's cropped up then is a bit of technology, and we hope to be able to put into our Aspire precinct a 4D theatre. Telling the stories. We've had the gurus around the technologies there. We look like we've got the backing for that. And to engage the young people. So we'll have the big technology, we'll have the book area, we'll have a resource area to train, teach, explore, and my hope would be that at the end of the day, whoever the group is that comes in, if they really want to, they can go up and celebrate it in the cathedral. They could so pitch their program to make use of that whole area, inside, outside, with the big organ, with their trumpets, whatever it might be, to celebrate faith in all its manifestations. And instead of belting one over the head with our, pickaxes, we learn to respect where people have come from, and maybe in time, from a Christian point of view, they may all be one, in the oneness, the unity, because all the big faiths believe in the unity. God.
That's right.
And, that's where I'm at. It's what I believe, and I think it's time we did something about it.
Monsignor, thank you so much. That was a very passionate delivery at the end. It seemed like a very worthwhile cause too.
You're very kind.
So thanks for making the effort to come from Bendigo to talk with us. And good luck.
Thank you, Norman.
You've been watching Harmony and Diversity. We'll be back next week. Thanks for watching.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allahu